Okay, so you want me to start?
Go for it. The floor is
Okay.
yours.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Okay. Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining this session. It's really great to have you all with us today, and I want to talk about how to make PowerShell a real solution in 5 steps. My name is Heiko. I'm with a company called ScriptRunner, and we are based in Germany. And we've been around for 6 years now, and our goal is to simplify the way you develop, manage, and delegate PowerShell. So that's our team, by the way. Yeah, you can reach me on all the comment channels on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on GitHub, by email, old school, you know. Yeah, we are very much into also supporting and working with the community. And one of the things that we provide is a PowerShell poster. You might have or not heard about this poster. This is something that you can pin to your wall that shows you, yeah, the frequently used things around PowerShell, commandlets, how to work with Active Directory, things like that. And you can actually order that on our website, and we send it almost throughout the whole world. So if there's one thing you get out of this session today, it's maybe okay, you can get this PowerShell poster. So yeah, I will start with a couple of slides, and then I'm going to switch to my demo environment so I can really show you what that means when we talk about making PowerShell a real solution. So everything that we do with ScriptRunner is obviously based on PowerShell, and we all know PowerShell is a great technology to manage not only Microsoft products but things like AWS, Google, VMware, whatever. And it's a great tool for people who are familiar with the command line, who know how PowerShell works, and of course who have the permissions to do things in backend systems and run their scripts against these backend systems. So, which means PowerShell pretty much is a tool for the IT pros, for the IT experts. And if we're thinking about starting to delegate the execution of scripts so that maybe somebody can spin up a VM, starting an onboarding process, offboarding processes, stuff like that. It's not impossible, but it is, yeah, there's no real easy and secure way to do that, to start delegating recurring tasks to service desk people, to people and end users and stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons for that is there is no real centralized management around all this PowerShell components, starting with the credentials, having a centralized place for scripts, and to give it and start delegating and use it in an easy way. Which means, as a result, even though of course obviously we're using PowerShell, it's still the IT pros who have to run these scripts. So people knocking on the door to ask you to do things like things in Office 65 and Azure or whatever. And so the goal for ScriptRunner is really to give you a solution that where you can take all the great stuff that you most probably already do with PowerShell, and to broaden the audience, and to have to make this technology accessible to people, let's say, outside of the PowerShell expert circle. And the key to that is centralization. So what does that mean? It means that we talk about, if we wanted to centralize all the different pieces around PowerShell, we talk about standardization. We want to make sure everybody works with the latest version of a script, so it's not being sent around via email or hanging out in some network shares or something like this. So no matter if it's user A or B who starts this process, it always happens the same way. We also talk about collaboration, meaning on one hand, of course, developing scripts together in team or multiple teams, and then of course using the result and consume the scripts in multiple teams, and maybe even throughout a whole organization. And that also, of course, means we need to know what happens. So we're talking about monitoring. So to know what script ran at what time, how long did it take, was there an error, all these things. There need to be a dashboard and logging and all that. And of course, we talk about security, which means on one hand to have a secure and centralized way to manage the credentials to run the scripts. And on the other hand, when we talk about thinking about delegation, it's of course you don't want to make people in help desk or God forbid end users give them privileged permissions in their backend systems. So these are the two aspects that of course are important when we want to start delegating the execution of scripts to people, as I said, outside of the expert circle, maybe people who have never ever maybe seen PowerShell or maybe don't even know that it exists, but you want them to use it because that's how they can get their job done. And we also talk about automation in the sense of that it's not just about somebody starts the script manually, but of course it could be a scheduled approach, a scheduled process for housekeeping, for example, or it could be that another third-party system should be able to trigger scripts, let's say monitoring systems or ITSM system or workflow systems that should be able to trigger scripts by talking to ScriptRunner and telling us what script to run, what other parameters, what other parameter values, and all that is we achieve really by centralizing all of these different aspects around PowerShell. So how do we do that? We start with centralizing the scripts, which means we have a centralized repository on the ScriptRunner server, which also means, of course, it can be included and synchronized with things like Git or TFS or Azure DevOps, for example. So you have your CI/CD pipeline going on over there, and once a script becomes productive, it can be used with ScriptRunner. The second step is talking about this credential management. And here we support, by the way, also password servers. At the moment, we support CyberArk, Pleasant, and Psychotic, besides the built-in functionality of storing that credentials on the ScriptRunner server in the Windows Credential Store. Now, what's important to understand is that when we talk about executing these PowerShell scripts, the only instance who actually does that is the ScriptRunner server. That's why we call that here the execution proxy. So ScriptRunner is the instance that runs the scripts, that has to know the credentials, and it's the only instance that has to have access to your backend systems, no matter if it's on premises, it's hybrid, or in the cloud. So only ScriptRunner actually talks to that backend system, which means on the other side, if we go here to the users on the left side, let's say if you start delegating things like doing something in Office 365 in Azure or in SharePoint or VMware or whatever, these people are talking to ScriptRunner, which means this could be just a normal domain user, and based on the delegation within ScriptRunner, you enable this person to trigger the execution of a script where this user doesn't have to have any kind of direct access to your backend system. So that's why it's really a secure way to start delegating the bits and pieces that you really want these people to be able to use. And because we talk about people who are most probably not familiar with the PowerShell console and all that, what we also do is we automatically transform and kind of translate the PowerShell scripts into a web user interface, which basically means we're looking into the synopsis and the parameter block to create something like this, what you see here as a screenshot, which is just spinning up and starting a new team, for example, which also means that we make sure that only the things that are really necessary for the for this user to see and to interact with is really visible to them. And we provide drop-down lists, date pickers, stuff like that. So really the goal here is to make it as easy as possible for the user and for you to be able to control what these people are able to see. And with all that, we can start delegating recurring tasks to people in help desk, to end users, and so on. And so what you see here, this is the Delegate app, and I will show you all that when we switch to my environment. And each of these tiles that you see here represents a use case, which is obviously a PowerShell script. And depending on what you have delegated within ScriptRunner to these people, they might see 1 tile, 2 tiles, 3 tiles, or whatever. We also see we have this tabs over here, which helps people if they have multiple actions, as we call them, available. So it's been organized in a way that they can find and categorize the different types of scripts for different platforms, maybe. And as the last step here, it's really about not just having that ScriptRunner instance as an island to run scripts, but it's also about integrating that into your infrastructure, into your processes, into your workflows, which means we have web service connectors where you can say, okay, if a monitoring system, if there's a sensor that detects an error and the solution is to run a script to restart a service or spinning up a new web or enhancing a VM, then you can enable these systems to talk to ScriptRunner and trigger the right scripts with the right information. Or it could be a workflow system if we're thinking about processes like spinning up VMs, where there is an approval process, of course, going on before the actual technical implementation is being done. And so this is something that could go on SharePoint or as a Power App, and then these systems can again talk to ScriptRunner, and we are going to take care about of executing the scripts with the right credentials, talking to the backend system, logging all the activities, etc. So basically, we have what we can do. We have three ways of running scripts. One is manually. Somebody clicks on the tile to start a script. Of course, then we have the schedule part, and we have the automatic part where we talk about the REST API. And I will show you all this possibilities now, actually, because now I'm going to switch to my demo environment. So I just stop sharing and switching to my other screen in a second. So I hope that's gonna work. All right. Okay. So yeah, here we are in what we call the admin app. So as I said, it all starts with the scripts. So here I have all my scripts that I have available here on my machine. It's like 900 something scripts. Now, actually, most of the scripts I haven't developed myself. We provide many ready-to-use scripts on our GitHub repository. So if you go to github.com/scriptrunner and you go to action packs, there you see actually hundreds of scripts for many different platforms that you can start using and synchronizing with ScriptRunner, and of course even use it without ScriptRunner. And you can take a look at obviously how we develop our scripts, which is basically based on the best practice approach for Microsoft, having a synopsis, which we will see is quite important because we are, for example, we use the parameter description to create that web user interface. And obviously, we are also going to look into the parameter block to find out, is this a datetime parameter, so we automatically translate that into a date picker, for example, or is this a parameter that contains a regex, which means we are going to take care of the validation here and stuff like that. So this might be interesting for you to look at the scripts here, which are available here on GitHub. And if we look at the machine itself, so all my scripts that I'm using are here in this folder structure. And what we will see now when I'm going to switch back to my admin app is that this folder names automatically become tags. What does that mean? So if I search for Azure, for example, I only see my scripts that belong to my Azure platform, which basically means they are stored in a folder called Azure. Or if I want to look for my script for Teams, for example, and what you all might realize that we're not just detecting the scripts in this folder structure, but also if the scripts contains functions, we detect this as well, which means if you later on you want to delegate maybe not a whole script, but just a particular function, you can do this and treat that just like the script, so to speak. The second step I mentioned is we need to have the credentials. And so here we have the credentials for many different platforms. Typically, we of course we talk about service accounts that are used by our customers. And we also see a mix of, we have credentials that are stored locally here on the ScriptRunner server, but I also have credentials that are being retrieved in real time when a script tries to connect, in this case, to Exchange. And this password, this credential will be retrieved from my Pleasant server that runs in my environment. And as I mentioned before, at the moment there are 3 password servers we support: Pleasant, CyberArk, and Psychotic. And we are also in the process of adding new password servers. Actually, we already have an experimental version of a connection to the credential manager, which we are also going to develop further as it becomes productive. And so we have the scripts, we have the credentials. The third step here is we configure the targets, and targets are the actual backend systems that we want to run our scripts against. For example, if we look at Exchange here, I'm configuring, okay, what's my backend system that I want to talk to, and how do I want to talk to it, which again brings us to that credentials that I just mentioned. And you can create all kind of different target types. So it can be a local execution, of course. It can be a PowerShell remoting, which also means it can support things like if you have Chia endpoints where from there the script should be executed. We support this as well. We can combine targets into collections, which is very helpful. For example, if you have housekeeping processes where you want to run a script against, I don't know, 50, 60, hundreds of servers or clients, you can decide if that should happen in parallel or in sequence, and what should happen if one target is maybe down. Should the whole process stop, or should we just skip that machine and stuff like that? And then, of course, we have all kinds of cloud targets, which means, for example, if we look for Office 65 here, what we do here is actually, of course, we need a name, and again we need a credential, and then you can configure what kind of services you want to use with this target. Is it going to be Teams or Exchange? And we are, by the way, also now support the XOV2 module with the certificate-based authentication. So this is all the stuff that, if you look at it from the native perspective of PowerShell, which you can do technically in PowerShell itself, and everything that you can do there, you can easily integrate into a ScriptRunner and make it manageable in a nice and centralized way. And the goal here is, as we will see, is really to take that scripts and make them available to people, as I mentioned before, to people outside of the experts, the PowerShell experts, so to speak. And one thing I also want to show you is, of course, if we look at PowerShell 7, which is also supported, of course, you might have remoting targets where you need SSH, which of course is also supported, where you can create credentials based on with your SSH keys. So if you use PowerShell 7 with Linux or Mac OS, that's of course also something that you can integrate into a ScriptRunner. Okay, so we have the scripts, we have the credentials, we know the different systems that we want to use in the back end. And so with this, we can create what we call actions. And action is kind of bringing all that bits and pieces together and to make it a use case. And one of the use cases could be, okay, somebody should be able to maybe create a new team based on the standardized guidelines of your company, which means if I'm taking this action here, which will do that, we will see something like this. And so that input form here is automatically created from the script that is being used behind the scenes, so to speak. So this is kind of a view of the administrator, of somebody who's actually creating and working with the scripts and configuring all these different bits and pieces. And if we're looking at the consuming side, I'm switching to the delegate app. So here we have the view of somebody, maybe in help desk or maybe even an end user, if we think about Teams, or maybe setting out of office notifications for somebody who calls in sick. And so if an end user is opening and starting this action, it looks like this. It's more simplified because here the user doesn't need to know the name of the parameters, for example. And but what's actually happening in the background is exactly the same as if it would be an administrator. We also have the possibility to switch between languages, so we have different descriptions for this parameters, for example. And of course, if you want to make changes to it, and I'm going to, it's ISE still, old school. Why is that? Because we have a nice little extension to the ISE, which is not available for Visual Studio Code at the moment, at least. That's why here it's I'm working with the ISE. And what this ScriptRunner plugin here does is it gives me the access to the scripts, even if I don't have to go to the share and work on the scripts. I can, for example, I can filter for my scripts that, for example, does what we just saw, creating something in Teams. And what I can do is I can check out that script. I can take a look at the actual state of it. And if I want to make a change to maybe very sensible change to the description here, I can do that. I can check that in again, and hopefully I have some good information that I put in here for other people, so that they know what I have done. Okay, whatever. So I'm checking that in. And now if I'm lucky and I'm refreshing the page and I'm starting this action again, we should see that that change takes effect immediately. So this is how you directly control how, for example, in this case, how this parameter description is being used. Now, what's also important to know is, of course, we know that this Teams module and the command led to creating new teams contain many more parameters. And so what I have done here is, instead of displaying all that parameters to this user, because we talk about standardization, I have pre-configured most of these parameters already, and then I said, okay, I'm hiding this parameter from the input form. Why? Because this is something, it's the standardized way of doing things in your organization, so there's no need to display this to the user because they cannot change it anyway. And so to simplify this whole process, this makes perfect sense to just say, okay, these are the things, this is how it should work. These are the things we want to allow or maybe disallow. and then only the things that really need the attention of a user, where you need to have input from a user, this should be visible, and that's exactly what's happening here, which means there is the name, the description, and obviously the members for this team in this case. And here we also see that, of course, there is no typing necessary. So the user is represented with a list of users that, in this case, this user is able to see. In maybe another user might be able to see other users, or if we're thinking about Active Directory, maybe somebody would only see people, mailboxes or users from a particular OU, which means this is something that is controlled within ScriptRunner. So you don't have to do that in your scripts. So which means your scripts can stay pretty static. And then the management around who is seeing what kind of users should be selectable, that's done within ScriptRunner. And so here we see a result of what we have just done, and which has been, by the way, has been done by this user Tina, which is and it's just a normal domain user, as I mentioned before. So, and also, for example, we could spin up. You would be able to spin up a VM in Azure, and we're coming back to this use case later on. Now, what is also, I think, very helpful is, of course, we're talking about the monitoring functionality of ScriptRunner, which means here in the dashboard, we can now see that there was this user Tina, and she started this action. The target was this Office 65 tenant. We used this credential, and here we see all the parameter values, the ones that were visible to the user, but also, of course, the other ones that we are using when we execute the script based on the hidden parameters that we have set before, and then you get the result of that, what happened, and of course you have the detailed report what happens behind the scene, so to speak, and that gives you the full control about all the different bits and pieces. Now, what I want to show you is how we can actually create such an action, and as I said, it starts with the script. So if we would like to achieve what we just looked at, I would take a script. In this case, it's this script where that comes from our action pack to create a new team. So I mark that. I want to create a new action. Now, what you also can do within ScriptRunner is you can say, okay, I have one ScriptRunner instance, and on this machine, we have scripts for the Exchange team, for Azure team, for the SharePoint team, and I want to make sure that the SharePoint guys are not able to mess around with the scripts from the Exchange team, for example. And so you can decide if you want to make that script available for every admin within ScriptRunner, or maybe just for a particular team. So in this case, I'm leaving it for public. Now, here we have naming and tagging information. So I'm just changing the name. So I know it belongs to this one. And the second step is now I'm selecting the target. So the obvious choice would be using the Office 65 tenant, which is perfectly fine. In my case, I'm doing it a little bit different, and I will show you why afterwards. I will go for a local execution. Interesting. Why? We will see that. We choose local execution, and that's actually it. So I'm storing that. So now if I'm going to actions, I should see, hopefully, that new action, and it's right here. So let's try if it's going to work. I'm clicking on run to say, okay, I want to have a new team. Call it so-called, for example. And what we see, there's no other, at least visible, mandatory parameter, but I don't see the OK button here, which tells me, okay, there is something still missing. And so I'm going to the edit mode, and what we see here is that there is another mandatory parameter which is auto hidden because it's a credential information. What does that mean? So here I have targets. I can have a target where I have a credential bound to that target, but I can also have additional credentials within an action, within a script, which actually exactly happens here. And that's because this is a script that has been that I'm using for quite a while before we had that actual team functionality in the target itself. And so that's why we see this additional credential here for this Office 65 connection. So what I'm doing, so I have configured that. So let us try to run this again. New team for SoCal. And we see the OK button, which is nice. So let's see what's happening. And okay, we have another error. And if we go down here, we see, okay, there is something wrong. So there was a disconnect MS Teams commandlet. And that's because obviously this command was not recognized. It's not part of the main script, but it is part of a library script. And so if we go back to the configuration, I can show you, and that's why I choose this way of doing it, because here I can show you what you can actually additionally configure in your action. So let's say here now we want to do something with Teams. Another scenario could be you want to do something in your SQL server, and you have to connect to SQL, and when you after executing the scripts you want to disconnect. And if you should actually do that, you put all that functions into a library script. What you can do is you can say, okay, if I'm having this centralized library script, I want that to be preloaded whenever this action is being executed. So all the functions from this library script becomes available whenever this action is triggered. And that, of course, is a great way of simplifying the way you develop and maintain your scripts, because you can put all that stuff, in this case for Teams, or in other cases for SQL or for SharePoint or whatever, into a library script, maintain it there, and then you just say, okay, whenever I'm doing something here for this platform, I know I need these functions. I'm just configuring that in the action. So next try, hopefully now it looks better. Let's see. Let's see what's happening. And so, by the way, here in the lower right corner, I can click on that, and I can see in real time what's actually happening in the background. So now we are trying to connect, and yeah, 0 errors. That looks good. So this is this just shows you a little bit about the things that are actually possible when you configure an action. And now what we have done is okay, we created a team but no members, right? Because the members have not been a mandatory parameter. So what we of course could do now, we could go back and change that in the configuration of my param block and say, okay, I want my users to be, okay, I have to check it out. See, that's why we have that plugin here. So now I can make the changes. That's the way it should be. And going back to here, we are, okay, check it in. Okay, make users mandatory. All right. Okay, so I'm just reloading that to be sure that the change takes effect. And I'm going to run that action again. New team 2, so go. And what we see now, yeah, I cannot click on OK because down here somewhere we have the users that I have to add to that action. Now, okay, I could start typing in the names and stuff like that, but actually I'm lazy. I don't want to do that. And this is where our queries come into the picture, because instead of typing, I want the people to select the users from a list. And I'm going back to the edit mode, and we're going to this users parameter, and here we have this nice little button, and this opens up this create new world of queries, which means here I have a scripted query that gives me all the users from my Office 65 tenant. And as you can see here, and I can show you some other examples as well. This can be used for all kinds of objects, Active Directory, Office 65, VMs, whatever, snapshots. So here I have selected the list of Office 65 mailboxes or users. So let's run it again. Okay, I have to keep track of the numbers. I think it's 3, could be right. Oops. Okay, so coming down here. So now here, instead of having just an input field, I have this dialog of selecting the different users. And that, of course, number one, as I mentioned earlier, is really helping you or helping the users to work with this in a very easy way, and it gives you the control about should this person see really all the users in your tenant, or maybe just a subset of it. And again, still, it's under the underlying script is still the same. It's just the management layer on top of that, where you decide, okay, for this person, everything is possible as visible. For others, maybe it's limited, and the result is it's exactly the same. What happens here, and so this is how you develop your different actions, your use cases. And if you click here on details, you can see all the different bits and pieces that kind of are making this action working. So we have the targets, we have the library script, we have the main script, we have the credential and stuff like that. And now what we're adding to that now is the delegation part. So if I'm going to the action, I can say, okay, now I have done that, and now I want to make this available for help desk. So I can go in the action, but I can also just say, okay, I'm going down here and click on delegate, and then I can say, okay, I want to make this action available to a specific group of people or multiple groups, because they should be able to work with that. And you can work with things like color schemes, which kind of helps to say, okay, all my Teams actions are in green, all my Azure actions are in orange, and stuff like that. You can work with localizing options here. And so what I'm doing, so I just started, or no, I configured this delegation for this particular action, which means now if I'm going back to my delegate user and I'm refreshing the view here, we should see this new action appearing, hopefully. Yeah, here it is, right? So that's the one. And so now, because we haven't done what we saw in the first example, we haven't pre-selected and pre-configured all the other parameters. They are still, of course, visible, which means now you would also start, of course, configuring that other parameters and setting it to hide. So again, you would just ending up with the list of parameters that really needs the attention of the user. And if a user has a number of actions like this, and there are actions that are being used more frequently, then we can we can make that a favorite, which means every time I'm logging in, the first thing I see are all that actions here on the favorites tab. That really helps to organize and the way the way that users are working. Now, as we are in this team space still for a minute, I want to show you something else that you can do, and where ScriptRunner helps to make things work in a more easy way. And I'm going to switch to a client machine. I have a Windows 10 machine over here in my environment, and what we see and what we also provide as a sample script on GitHub is a script to clear the local Teams cache. Why is that important? At the moment, there's no button in Teams saying, okay, clear the local Teams cache. So in practice, it's a number of folders that have to be deleted and stuff like that. And that might be helpful because sometimes this cleaning the cache solves issues with Teams. What you can do here is I can provide an action that has no additional parameter. It's just a script that runs in the background, and what it should do if I'm running that, it should close my Teams application and delete the these folders these cache folders of Teams. And while that is running, I'm going back to my admin machine because okay, wrong machine. Okay, I think it. Yeah. Okay. Obviously, Teams has been closed, and I guess the folders have been deleted. Now that's great. So how did this work actually? And we can go back here. I think I mentioned we add some additional flavors to the PowerShell scripts. We have, and to be more precise, we have a hash table with multiple information that you can use, for example, to control how a script should run. And for example, we have this SRX environment variable started IP, and that tells us, okay, who from which machine that tile has been triggered. And so in this case, we're using that information just to find out, okay, from which machine, who clicked, no, it's not who, but on which machine that that action has been triggered. And so obviously we're using that to find out the host name, and then that's what we're using when we start the invoke command. And just to show you that, there are a number of additional information that you can use. So in this case, what I just showed you, it was the started IP information, but it's also, it could be the user, and this information, like the name or the IP address, could also control how the script operates. Like, okay, if somebody starts an action from a network sub segment that should not be, or that's not allowed, maybe then you can use that information within your script to control what's actually happening. And that gives you another additional level of control about the behavior of your scripts and what should be allowed and what should not be allowed. So this is something that I think really is pretty helpful. Yeah, to changing maybe gear a little bit, let's look at an example around Exchange Online. We see a number of customers struggling with this out of office notification management. It seems to be kind of trivial, but technically, but it is not. It's even more not trivial when it comes to solving these issues on the organizational level, which means if somebody calls in sick, how somebody from HR can configure an out of office notification for this person without giving this person full control over the mailbox. And what happens in reality typically is then, okay, there's a call to the IT guys. Could you please do that for us? Now with ScriptRunner, you could have an action that looks like this, where, okay, I want to have a scheduled out of office notification. And here again, we're talking about this query about the user. Could be a person who sees everything, or maybe just people from a particular department or something like this. Talking about standardization, now here we have another type of query, which is a static query, and I will show you how that looks when I triggered this action. Now here we have a predefined set of notification templates that we can select, and because in the script we have it's a date time parameter, we automatically use that and we translate that into a date picker. And so which means if I'm running that now, we should see a out of office notification being created for the user that I have selected. While that is running, let's take a look at this query that we just saw, which is a pretty simple one. It is actually, I mentioned that it's a static list, which says, okay, on the left side, we see what was visible in the user interface. And on the right side, this is the technical information that we use when the script is actually executed by ScriptRunner. And you also might realize there is actually there are another variables in the text, like start date and end date. So this is how we translate the input from the user into the text of this notification, which is also, of course, helpful to make sure that there is no outdated date information in this notification. So let's take a look if this action was successful. And we already went to the dashboard. There's another way of getting this information, which is you can click here on that column, or you can just mark the action and go to the dashboard here, and you can see all the actions that have been done, all the executions of these actions, which is kind of a drill down into, I only want to see the action and the results for this particular action. And so here again, we see what's actually happened. And what we also did here, we create a nice little report for the user so they can see what actually happened. So this is a simple convert to HTML example. Talking about this different reporting stuff, of course, you could also, together with additional modules or one particular module, of course we can create things like an Active Directory report, which could look like this, which is actually being done based on a module from the PowerShell gallery. Talking about modules, maybe I haven't even mentioned that. Of course, the modules is another aspect of centralizing the whole aspect of using PowerShell, because it's not just about the scripts, but it's also about the modules. So of course, if you want to do something with, for example, VMware, you need PowerCLI, and it has to be installed on the ScriptRunner server, and that's it. So, and you can start using and delegating that, and without worrying if this module installed on the other machine where somebody should start this script, is it the latest one, and all that. So this is really another interesting aspect. And by the way, this works exactly the same like the library script. So if you want to have a module preloaded and instead of a function, you can configure that in your action as well. So again, and just to give you, maybe we go back here and I can show you that. So we looked at the library script preload, but you could also say, okay, I want to have a specific module being loaded with this action. So that's just another an additional way of using it. Another use case maybe could be spinning up Azure VM. And so this could look like this. So, okay, I want to have a name of a VM. And here, this is a combination of, here we have a validate set that comes from the script, but it also could be a query, which is true for this one here. So here you could say, okay, yeah, I want to spin up this VM, and I only have these 3 regions available, and I only have these 2 VM sizes available when I want to spin up a VM. Why? Because I want to avoid that somebody spins up a extremely expensive VM. Now, also showing, just to show you this example of these queries here, let's go to that number 1, the location. Pretty straightforward. Here again, on the left side, this is what the user sees. On the right side, that's the technical info that we use when we run the script. The same is true with the VM sizes, which should be here somewhere. VM sizes, yeah. So again, here on the left, that's what the user can see. Hopefully, some meaningful information. And this is the technical one that's being used when we start the action. And by the way, having this queries available, you can also create cascading queries. And I think I have an example here. Here that works in a way of, okay, I have 3 parameters, and I'm starting with selecting the OU path in this case. So let's say, okay, I'm using this one. Once I have done that, I see the group of this OU, or the groups of this OU. I select the group, and then I'm presented with the users within this group, which is extremely powerful, because this could be, in another scenario, this could be VMware host VMs snapshot, for example, or Office 65 tenant teams and members, for example. Again, it all comes down to make sure people don't have to type, and for you to have the control about what's actually visible to the user, and without maintaining all that in your scripts. So again, it's really about having your scripts in the background with the main things, and with the code, but having the management being done within ScriptRunner. And here we see especially the queries become very, or are very, very, very helpful. Okay, so we saw manual actions. Now, besides clicking on a tile to do something, of course, there are other possibilities, and one, of course, is having reports being done on a scheduled base, or in this case, I'm looking into our GitHub repository every hour to find out, is there some new scripts or updated scripts. So this is typical approach, obviously, for housekeeping processes. And so you could say, okay, I have actions that should run every Friday and every Sunday, for example, and I want to configure an email notification so I get an info if something went wrong with that, with this action, which is one way, of course, doing notifications. On the other way, other ways, of course, would be adding something to your scripts where you automatically push a message into a Teams channel, for example, which kind of, for example, happens here, I think, if something goes wrong, and I will show you that example in a second, where then, yeah, instead of writing emails, which is kind of still becomes more and more obsolete in many cases, not everywhere, but in many cases, of course, you could use that, but you could do other things in your script, obviously. So, and of course, also all the scheduled executions are ending up in the dashboard, so you can see what happened with the scheduling approach, just as if somebody would have clicked on the tile. And the third way of using ScriptRunner is having this fully automated approach. So in my case, I have a PITG monitoring system running in my environment, and I'm allowing this machine to talk to ScriptRunner, and if it authenticates with the right user, I also enable this system to trigger scripts and or actions with the parameters. And what actually happens, it's a silly example, but I'm showing it to you. So if I'm stopping the time service on the domain controller, not a good idea, but anyway, what should happen is if we go back to this Teams channel here, we should see a message coming up just like the one I did some tests before, obviously. We should see a message like this, which combines like static information from a script with variable information, in this case from the PITG system, which means, and here it is. Okay, excellent. So what does that mean? So if I'm going to my PITG system, and by the way, we're talking about a REST API, right? So it could be ServiceNow, it could be any kind of system that is able to trigger REST calls, or like in this case, because it cannot be done directly with PITG, even though it's a great solution, I think. In this case, we're doing it in a different way. Here we trigger a PowerShell script that is actually part of our solution. And as a parameters, we transfer the name of an action plus the parameter, also including variable information from this very monitoring system, like the command sensor, and getting this information over so we can use it when we execute the scripts. And so this is the third way of working and triggering actions. And again, all this ends up in our dashboard. So here we can see, okay, this has been a web service connector action based on my PITG monitoring connector. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. As one of the last things that I want to show you is that and something that we're working on right now, which is I think pretty cool. Now, if we think about delegation at the moment, people in help desk or end users are working with the Delegate app. Now, in a few weeks' time, what will be possible is that instead of somebody logs into our Delegate app, if you run a self-service portal or a service portal, you can integrate this action or every action that you would like into this user interface. So here, this is just the same example that we just ran before, spinning up a VM in Azure, and we can see it's perfectly integrated into that website. It has the same color scheme. So it's like the people are working in the space where they are familiar with, and on the other hand, it's still in the back end, we still have the same functionality with the queries, with the validation checking, with the authentication and stuff like that. And it's pretty straightforward because it's just really integrating that iframe. So because internally each action has an obviously a unique ID, and why am I saying obviously all the time? I don't know. Anyway, so you can, yeah, if you know then this information about what's the ID of the action, you can integrate that as an iframe. Yeah, also configure. You can configure if you want to display the name or the description. There also will be a way of having the predefined parameters already being visible there, and that's, I think, a pretty cool way of bringing that great stuff that you can do with PowerShell even nearer to the users, and even without knowing even less about PowerShell, ScriptRunner, and whatever. It just becomes part of yeah, the daily task of these people working on a web page that they are already familiar with, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. Yeah, maybe a last thing I mentioned, of course, we support PowerShell 7. Even though I have to say there's a lot of talk about it, I don't see it in production at not so many customers. But of course it's there, and it will become more important. What we provide with our setup package is a self-contained PowerShell 7 package that you can just, if you install ScriptRunner, it's already there. And if you want to do something with PowerShell 7, you can just switch from our Windows PowerShell host to the PowerShell 7 host. Of course, if it's Linux, then of course you need to have the right target that has the SSH certificate information bound to it. But other than that, if it's just PowerShell 7 on Windows, you install it, you install ScriptRunner, and you're good to go. You can just switch each action that you want to PowerShell 7, and make use of forage parallel and all that good stuff that comes with PowerShell 7. Yeah, so that was what I actually wanted to show you. I can either switch back to presentation to kind of sum up what we saw, or of course I'm open for questions. I haven't looked at the chat yet. I don't know if there are already some questions that are waiting there to be answered. So let me just see. Are there some questions? Doesn't look like it. Or am I missing something? I think there are no questions. So if you have questions, I think it's also okay if you I don't know even if it's possible. Okay, there is one word, pricing. Okay. Thanks, Mike, for your feedback. Yeah, pricing. Okay. So let's go to our website. I think that's the best way of, and we should go for the English one. Here we have, it's kind of hidden, but it's there. We have a licensing page that gives you a general overview about how the solution is licensed. And I don't want to go into much detail, but just to give you an overview. So we have kind of two types of ScriptRunner. One is the ScriptRunner Essential Edition, and the other one is the Corporate Suite. The Essential Edition is, as it states here, it's there for small teams. Why? Because it comes with 5 licenses. 5 licenses for us are named licenses, are the users who actively work with ScriptRunner. In our case, with the admin app and the delegate app. And later on, maybe with this integration that I showed you at the end. So let's say if you have two admins and 3 people in service desk, that would end up that would sum up to this 5 users. Then on the other hand, we have the Corporate Suite. The Corporate Suite starts with 10 users. That's the solution where you can add all that different. Number one, it can scale, of course, so it could be 20, 50, whatever users. And you can add additional, in brackets, priced connectors, like a web service connector, or maybe a password server connector, or I haven't even mentioned that. So we have, if you have, let's say, legacy systems that are not able to talk REST, but they can send out emails, then we have an email inbound connector, which means we are constantly monitoring an IMAP mailbox to find out if there are, let's say, new tickets coming in via email, telling us which action to trigger with which name, parameter name, and parameter value. So with the Corporate Suite, you can do all that. You can also add additional backend systems, talking about high availability and stuff like that. That's the general way we license that. So you can kind of pick and choose how you want to set up your ScriptRunner installation. And the Essential Edition, it's a yearly subscription, and it's around about $1,900 US per year. This is kind of a starting point. And then let's say if you want to know more details, as we are on this page already, you could also use that form here to request a more detailed quote. If you have to say, okay, I have 15 people, like 5 users in help desk and 10 users in help desk, and I would like to know what would be the cost for that. And by the way, also just to mention that we are working on something like a community edition that I hope will be available by the end of the year. Okay. Okay. And here again, I mentioned it in the beginning, right? We have this nice little PowerShell poster. So even if you have no use for ScriptRunner, maybe you still want to get this poster. Okay. There's another question regarding if there are plans to integrate other languages, for example, like Python. Not at the moment. We really see us as and that's what the claim says, right? We see us as I don't know if that's true, but be the #1 for PowerShell management. So it's really, we are focusing at the moment solely on doing everything to make PowerShell management as easy as possible, which of course also means then from PowerShell, if you have a main script starting with PowerShell, you could do everything else behind that, but we don't work on a direct integration and support for other languages at the moment. So there's another question. Yeah, okay, so this was about the exchange target and the implicit remoting session. So the question was, does the target takes care of all that, which is exactly the case. So if you're using this exchange target and you tie it to your action, there is no need to have any credential information in your script, and you don't have to worry about establishing this session. This is, by the way, true also for all the other, let's say, Azure or cloud targets. You don't have to have that in your scripts. It's really it's the target that handles all the necessary steps in the background for you. That's exactly right. Okay, what's the self-service app? Okay, good question. So what I showed you until now is we have the admin app and we have the delegate app. Now the self-service app is kind of an even more simplified delegate app for users that might only need maybe 5 actions. So which means the self-service app is limited in the number of actions that you can configure for these users. And so the idea is, if we look at the delegate app, this is typically the tool for people in help desk, which means we have a kind of a limited number of users with a bigger, not unlimited, but with a bigger number of actions. The self-service app aims for scenarios where you say, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actions, password reset, out of office notification settings, stuff like that. And I want to roll that out to maybe your whole organization. And this is then where the self-service app makes perfect sense. And what also I think will even more maybe make sense will be this integration piece that I showed you with that with the integration into an existing self-service portal, for example, which means licensing wise, because that's a different piece. The self-service app, which is priced in per package, so it's not just a single self-service user, because as I said, it aims for use cases that you really want to deploy maybe to all your people in your organization. And so that it comes in packages that officially start with hundreds users, but it also might start with 50 maybe, depending on the talks with you guys. And so that's why we have the self-service app. It's really for a limited number of actions that you want to make available for a big number of employees in your organization. Okay. I don't see any more questions. Then maybe what I will do is just going back to the presentation just to show you. So let's say, okay, you kind of interested in what you saw, and you might want to take the next step, which of course would be great. So you can download the software. It comes with a 30-day trial license where you can check out all the bits and pieces that I showed you, including the web service functionality and password server connectors. Of course, if you want to have maybe a talk about your individual use cases, you can always book a session with me, so we can talk about your infrastructure, your requirements, and stuff like that. Again, I want to come back to this ready-to-use PowerShell scripts that are on our GitHub repo, because we see that as, depending on where you are in your PowerShell journey, it might help you to really start using that in a more broader way. But and it also, even if you're advanced, maybe it gives you some kind of ideas and inspiration about what else could you do, and then this scripts can be a good starting point to take the next steps and maybe to do even more with PowerShell. And also it gives you an idea about how we work with that our SRX environment hash table, because that's a pretty powerful thing to control also what you display to the user, like the HTML result that we saw and all that. So that might be something that you want to look at if you interested in maybe taking the next step and doing more with our solution. And if we don't have any more questions, which I think is not the case. Yep. Then I think it's time to say thank you to everybody who joined this session. I hope it was interesting for you. Maybe you learned a little bit. And by the way, I will upload the presentation to my GitHub repo, and I will tweet about that. And I don't know, Matt, if you have some follow up where I can also maybe add this presentation. I'm not sure.
Yes, you feel free to send it to me, just to the email you've been reaching me at, and I will tweet about that. I'll send out a message to the group with a link to that, as well as a link to the video once I have it uploaded. But I do want to thank you for this presentation. That was super informative, and this tool is exactly what I would have wanted. Actually, on my last team, when I started getting into PowerShell and I was writing scripts for other desktop support users to use, and just every step about asking them to come in and open up the shell and navigate to the script and run it by hand, that's not necessarily fun for everybody. So a tool like this would have made it much easier to accomplish that. So I think that this is a very valuable tool that a lot of people should take advantage of.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for having the chance to demo that to people of your user group. I think it's it's great. Thanks a lot again.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now.